Goeiedag, mijn naam is Evan, ik ben immigratieprocureur hier in Amerika en ik wil je helpen om immigratiewet te verstaan. Now, I've had a few people contact me about this same issue, so I believe it's relevant to many Afrikaner refugees who are still in South Africa and who have husbands or spouses, right? Let's be, gender neutral here, in the United States on H visas, on work visas. And this is going to be relevant, as I've said, to many of you. And the question or issue that I've had has actually come from refugees who are already here, is how do their spouses then adjust status to remain with their refugee spouse? So for example, the husband, let's take husband for example, is here working on an H visa, an agricultural visa, and the wife and children have come over as refugees and are here. What happens? What do you do? And the reason that I've been asked this question is because I received a call from an individual who is very upset and concerned about what to do in this exact situation. And the agency that they were dealing with, the group through the refugee process, being here in the United States, really didn't give them very good information. And I didn't dig too much. I didn't want to, pry and all that. I was trying to give help as best I can and as neutrally as I can. But the advice given was that the husband needs to file an I-730 as soon as possible in order to remain. And that's where there is a problem. You see, an I-730 is a petition to adjust status through a refugee family member, and in this case, it being a spouse. Now, the problem with that is the form that needs to be filed. You need to file an I-730, and it will be approved. Like, unless there's something seriously wrong, that I-730 will be approved, and you will then have your spouse adjust your status through you as a refugee, and they become the same status as you. They apply for lawful permanent residency after a year. Everything we've talked about becomes exactly the same. The problem is, an I-730 does not give the applicant, right? The applicant is actually the refugee applying, but the person who they're applying to adjust status for, that individual does not have the right to remain or to work in the United States. So if, for example, you come over as a refugee, your spouse is working here, and right now it's December 9th, and their H visa expires January 1st, right? You file the I-730, it's been accepted, it's being processed, no decision has been made yet. Come January 1st, that spouse has to go back to South Africa. They do not have any legal right to remain or to work here while that I-730 is being processed. Once it's approved, yes. Before its approval, no. And this can take months. We have, I know, and again, I'm not going to give out any information or things like that, but this has happened to individuals who came over in the first group in May, and the 730 has still not been approved yet. So that's what, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. That's, I hate mathing in my head, that's 7 months. So that's a long time. So the only way for your spouse, if you are a refugee coming over here and your spouse is still working in the United States, the only way for that spouse to remain for an indefinite period of time and to work is to file an asylum application. You could, in theory, continue to renew H visas, but at some point, remember, you got to go back to South Africa to do that process. And if you're genuinely afraid of returning, that's dumb. So your option is to file for asylum. And that asylum, by the way, that's not frivolous. That's not a false claim, not a false application. You genuinely fear returning to South Africa, and this is a way to stop your return, to stop you having to leave, to stop your removal to South Africa while you're waiting for your I-730 to process. So you would want to file an asylum application, which, by the way, you still have that issue of once you file an asylum application, you cannot work for 6 months. You won't get your EAD until that 6-month mark, and there's that initial filing fee. We all know this. We've talked about it in previous videos. Now remember, if you're on an H visa, you can continue to work till your H visa expires, but any overlap from the time you filed your application to that 6-month mark, you will be unable to work. But that buys you status here until your asylum claim is adjudicated, which can take months, if not years, and that gives time for the I-730 to be processed as a derivative of a refugee. To have your status adjusted as the spouse of a refugee. And if you happen, which I don't think is likely, to be called for a USCIS interview before the 730 has been processed, then you make the argument, my spouse is here as a refugee. Clearly there is a well-founded fear of future persecution, and you hope that they will grant you an asylum claim then. And even if they don't, they still will refer you to immigration court, and this process will go on and on and on and on, and buys you time. Okay, and again, it's not frivolous, it's not wrong, because it is a legit way you don't want to return because you have a fear of future persecution. So I hope this helps answer a few questions, because there are many people going through the refugee program or here already who have spouses here. And I did not want you to think that filing for that adjustment of status, that I-730, as the spouse of a refugee buys you any right to legally be here. It doesn't. You will still have to return to South Africa at the end of whatever visa you're here on. But the way to get around that, because you do have a genuine fear of returning to South Africa, is to file an asylum application. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that clears that up for some people who might be in that situation, because this now has been multiple people who are in the situation or are going to be in the situation if they're coming over soon as a refugee. So I wanted to make sure you understood that that spouse who's here, they will be granted status through you. Like, there's no reason an I-730 won't be approved. But it takes time with an overloaded system. And if whatever visa they're on expires before that is processed, they have to go back to South Africa, unless they file for an asylum application, which would then give them legal right to stay while it's being adjudicated, and also give you the right to an EAD after the initial 6 months. So I hope that helps answer some questions. Again, reach out if you do have any more questions on this issue. I hope I can help. I'm doing the best I can to help everyone I can answer any questions that I have the information on. So as always, remember to like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you for the next video.